Chapter 34. Blood transfusion. Celia was affected as she was never before. His words made her heart tremble and his warm touch sent shivers through her entire being. She was shaken to the core. He still had his forehead touching hers, but he did not say more for fear of being rejected. "Your Highness, I cannot," she tried to say. She was still trying to resist his advances. She was scared to love someone else. She had loved before, even though not in the same way, and it had only left her bitterly disappointed. Her family had left her. He was different from her family, that she knew, but mentally, in her subconscious, she was reticent of trying. Knock, knock. Someone interrupted, and so Celia did not finish what she was about to say. In a way, it was fortunate for Solars, at least that what his raging heart told him. Perhaps he had pushed her too much and he would only be rejected. She was about to say she could not. "Please just think about it. I do not need an answer now. I will wait longer. So please consider it properly," Solos pleaded. Then finally removed his forehead and walked to an appropriate distance away. "Come in," he said louder. "Your Highness, there are problems. There are rogues attacking our borders," his beta-mica informed. He could tell that His Highness had left the ballroom with Celia, and he knew from their smell that both of them were inside his office. But it had been decades since the last time rogues attacked. To have such courage, something was amiss. So he was forced to inform him. He could not make decisions on his own. "To our agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilgan, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm," Solos asked, frowning. Things were getting out of hand. The previous investigations had not produced any leads so far. First hunters and now rogues were attacking. There was certainly a connection between the two. "I understand," he replied to Micah, and then looked towards Celia. The latter was agitated because of their conversation, but she was now also thinking of the rogues. "I will go now. We will discuss more tomorrow. Even if you wish to go back to the academy, with rogues attacking, I cannot let you leave. It is not safe. Please at least obey me on this," Solos said gently. Celia nodded. He had said to obey him, but she could tell it was a request, not an order. So of course she would not be stubborn about it. "Let's go," Solos ordered Micah, after glancing one more time at Celia. But hours later, "Are you sure of this, Doctor?" Gabriel asked, tated, trying to keep his wolf from getting out of control. "Yes, I am certain," quickly replied the young doctor, who was also trying to keep calm. After treating Celia last time, his aptitude and knowledge impressed Solius, so he was now a chief doctor and thus the one in charge of the current patient. "The concentration and the chemical analysis we did confirmed it without doubt. It is the same wolfsbane," the doctor continued explaining. Gabriel was baffled. How would rogues possess weapons that hunters owned? And not only that, the wolfsbane in them was the same one that the hunters used on Celia. It had the same toxicity. He slowly massaged his temples and sighed. Anyway, it was not the most pressing matter. The current issue was vital. Anything else, they could figure out afterwards. "How is he? Has the regeneration kicked in yet?" Gabriel asked, worried. If it was the same wolfsbane, then it meant his life was in jeopardy. "No, the wolfsbane prevents the regeneration from happening. It attacks his system too fiercely for it to start on its own," the doctor said, truly worried. "Then do what you did in Celia's case. Treat it how you did in the Alpha's case," Gabriel immediately reasoned. "Remembering her recovery, I cannot help him like I did for the miss." The doctor explained a bit, but could not say more even if he wanted to. "Why?" Gabriel inquired, frowning. "If it worked for Celia, why wouldn't it also work for His Highness?" "I cannot say it," the doctor firmly refused. "What do you mean you can't say it? Do you realize who you have to treat? No one is more important than His Highness. He is our killer, our highest ranked werewolf," Gabriel said, not understanding his reasons. The last time when Celia was hurt, it was Solas who helped her, although he did not understand exactly how. But he knew for certain that he had found her in the forest and he also participated in her treatment. because for several days after he felt sluggish and out of breath. This was after he talked to him in the hospital, so it was clear that he helped. Why wasn't it possible for him to be treated as well now? Unless, is it a higher rate werewolf's command? Gabriel asked, realizing something. His Highness must have done something to help Celia, which was related to her rank. He asked him, that time, her rank, and it did seem to have something to do with the treatment. His Highness kept Celia's rank a secret, but for the doctors to keep the secret also, a higher-ranked werewolf's command was necessary. One could not know if they kept the patient-doctor confidentiality. What if there were traitors amongst them? The doctor only nodded, but did not verbally reply. Having the confirmation, Gabriel turned around and rushed towards the door of the doctor's office. "Where are you going?" the doctor asked, concerned. He was still unable to help the king without mentioning the treatment, so he was at an impasse. "I am going to go find someone to override that command," Gabriel replied, and did not stay to talk further. Every minute depended on that person. There was no time to waste. The doctor was bewildered. Who could override the king's command? It couldn't be the Alpha. Right. But she indeed received help from His Highness last time, so she was most likely the same rank. If it was her, then perhaps he could say the treatment he had to do and also ask for her help. It was late at night, or better said early in the morning, when Celia was woken up by the persistent knocking on the door. Well, not woken up per se, as she had quite some trouble falling asleep in the first place. Better said she was in the middle of trying to sleep, but was plagued by nightmares the moment she finally managed to shut her eyes. She had felt like something truly terrible was happening, so the noise in front of her door was in a way a confirmation of her fears. At this hour, for someone to look for her, it was surely not good. She swiftly got out of bed and opened the door without delay. This was the royal palace, so she opened the door without worry. This was the most secure place. No stranger could enter uninvited. Yesh quickly said, as she opened the door. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I need your help for something, right at this moment. Your presence is vital. Can you come with me?" Gabriel asked her succinctly. He felt he did not even have time to stay and explain what they needed to do. He would talk later, once they would be in the presence of the doctor. She could see the worry in his eyes. Could something have happened because of the roads? "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." She immediately answered. She did not question him. He was an important person in the kingdom. If he came for her, it was something urgent. Out of worry, she did not change even the pajamas she was wearing, only took an overcoat. Even her fluffy indoor slippers she did not change for regular shoes. Gabriel also did not comment on her choice of clothing. It was clear that no second could be wasted. Celia's heart started to beat faster, from the moment she saw the hospital in front of her eyes. It kept getting louder and louder, up until she arrived at the doctor's office. In a corner of her heart, she feared the worst. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I need Dr. Young to treat His Highness, as he was severely injured in the rogue's attack tonight. But the doctor can't help His Highness unless a higher-ranked werewolf rescinds the order His Highness has placed on him," Gabriel explained quickly. Celia looked at Gabriel, then to the young doctor he was pointing to. Her eyes were filled with worry. "Hearing of His Highness? How, W? He is the strongest of all of us." Celia replied, worried. "I know he is, but the rogues are weapons used by hunters. This has never happened before, so we were not properly prepared. The problem is His Highness was hit with wolfsbane bullets, just like you were several weeks ago. He helped you then in some way, but he has placed an order on the doctors, so they cannot help him how they helped you then. The only way for us to know what they did back then is for Dr. Young to be given permission," Gabriel said. He was also under a higher-ranking werewolf's order, so could not expressly say for her to rescind the order. He could only insinuate it. "I give you permission to tell us of the treatment you did on me, Doctor," Celia said, not asking for more explanations, using her alpha voice. She was deeply concerned to know the severity of His Highness's injuries, but it was more important to act fast rather than find other details. For the time being, having gained her consent, the doctor started to explain her previous treatment. His Highness had risked his life to save hers. The treatment that the doctors did implied a transfusion between two werewolves of the same rank. The shared blood had the burden on one body suffering from wolfsbane, and thus allowing its own regeneration to start. It was not in any way a risk-free solution. On the contrary, it could have killed him. The wolfsbane in her system was capable of killing several normal werewolves. As Gabriel explained, His Highness was quite lethargic for several days because of the treatment. It was such a dangerous way that the doctors had previously tried to discourage His Highness from doing it himself. But he did, regardless of his own life. He demonstrated his love through actions, without trying to gain anything from her. If not for the current situation, she doubted she would have ever found out. He had prohibited anyone from speaking of it after all. He never even mentioned to her the fact that she lied about the existence of her two wolves, or the fact that her rank in the documents was a false one. He had maintained the lie for her. He was also so worried about her that, even though he was suffering from the wolfsbane in his body, he still visited her every day and stayed with her for several hours. Each day, touching his white pale face that did not react to her touch. Her heart felt heavy. Big teardrops were flowing from her eyes. Seeing his condition, the strongest of werewolves was so frail in her eyes right now that she could barely control her trembling, waiting in his room for the doctors to start their treatment. As she gave her consent to them to perform the same procedure, she was remembering the brief conversation she had with Gabriel after the doctor went to gather the other doctors. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Do you know, even the previous queen did not hold the same rank as His Highness's father. But, unexpectedly, you do. You have the same rank as our king. That particular fact and the fact that His Highness fell in love with you at first sight. What do you think it means?" Gabriel asked her seriously. "Why are you asking me this, and why now?" Celia asked, surprised. She did not understand why Gabriel talked about this with her, especially now when His Highness was injured. She was also embarrassed that he knew of His Highness's feelings towards her. "You are a smart person, but quite naive and foolish in regards to His Highness. Or perhaps you are trying to be. Do you not think you could be His Highness's mate?" Gabriel asked, still maintaining his serious face. "But teacher, I already have a mate," Celia replied, confused. "You have one? Who?" Gabriel asked, surprised. "It does not matter who, as I have already rejected him. But the fact remains I can't have another one. A werewolf has only one mate for life." "Yes, that's true. A normal werewolf indeed has only one. But you are not a normal werewolf, are you?" Gabriel rhetorically asked her, looking straight into her eyes. "And let me ask another question. Did both of your wolves suffer when you rejected your mate?" The question left her thinking. Only Crescent at that time reacted to her mate, but Waning did not. She had thought that Leaning was probably also suffering, but Waning never mentioned it expressly. "I can see that you realize something. Am I right? In fact, only your fourth ranked wolf suffered. The first ranked one did not, as your first mate was not hers. What if indeed His Highness is also your mate? But Waning has never mentioned it. She would have wanted her mate." "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Since the moment His Highness laid eyes on you, he fell in love with you, and even his wolf sky likes you a lot. His Highness mentioned to me before that they both feel you are their mate, but only your human side. I know that Waning does not come out at all. If she never came out when you were with His Highness, it is likely that she does not know. Or perhaps it could be she has another reason. Now is not the time to ask her, but I am begging you to do so afterwards. Do you know, Solars is the most skilled warrior. He is the strongest of us all. Even if the wolfsbane was toxic, normally he should have been able to evade the bullets. But he seemed out of focus and disturbed by something since he arrived at the borders. I initially thought it was because of the rogues, that he was upset because of them, but the more I reflect on it, the more I think it is because of you. Celia knew that before he left. Solars was indeed upset. She was about to reject him. Miss Celia, we are ready. Please lie down on the bed, the doctors said, interrupting her reminiscence. Like before, she had also gathered the doctors, under Gabriel's advice, and ordered them to know of the treatment or the severity of His Highness's wounds. No one could know the king was injured, so now in the room only doctors were helping out. She nodded and listened to their instructions. Shortly after, they connected the intravenous drip to her hand. His blood quickly entered her body, paralyzing it because of the sharp pain. It hurt so much she was about to cry from the agony, but she railed at her instincts and stopped herself from screaming. Her face was becoming paler, and she even felt she was about to faint. Should we stop it? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing Clichut's enthusiasm. Can you handle it? Gabriel asked, worried. His priority was the king, but Solars's priority was most likely Celia. If there were irreversible repercussions, Solars would not forgive those who participated in his treatment. Right now he was a peaceful man, albeit a stoic and solemn one, but he knew just how ruthless he was when angry. It is all right. I can handle it, Celia said, through gritted teeth, but she knew it was only the beginning. The more blood passed through her body from him, the likely she was to pass out, or even die. Everyone, listen to me, no matter what the treatment for His Highness continues. Until he's well, no one is allo. Wait to enter. Then Celia said with difficulty, using her alpha voice. She had to make sure the doctors would continue. Even if she passed out, yes. The doctors replied in unison, showing their neck in submission. They felt from her almost the same pressure they felt from the king. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing Clichut's enthusiasm. You should not have done that, Gabriel exclaimed, worried. Now he could not stop it anymore. If something went wrong. Celia smiled a little, but she did not say anything. She did not have the strength anymore to speak coherently. She only managed to turn her head towards Solars's bed and look at his pale, bloodless face. Only hours earlier she had seen that now white face adorned with tinges of red blushes because of her. Only hours earlier she had seen that same face professing his love towards her. Only hours earlier she had seen that now silent face shed tears for her. Only hours earlier she had seen that now expressionless face frightened of her rejection. Only hours earlier she was about to reject that same face, denying the happiness and future they could have together. Time was so fleeting. As werewolves they had hundreds of years ahead of them, but she was now certain, looking at his face, that she was facing the possibility of living it without him, and she would not be able to. It was better if he was the one alive, rather than her. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing Clichut's enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing Clichut's enthusiasm. She heard Gabriel shouting, before closing her eyes and passing out. Desperate and sorrowful cries were heard in complete darkness, in the middle of nowhere, in the darkest of places. The only light that could be distinguished was the silvery white fur of a majestic wolf. She howled in pain with her muzzle turned towards the sky. She seemed so lonely and powerless, even though there was nothing but strength and royalty emanating from her large body. It took some time for Celia to recognize waning. She was a common collected wolf. She was always the mature one out of the three personalities. She was always so beautiful and strong, but now at her large eyes small tear droplets could be found. Waning, Celia called. It made the wolf stop her cries and look towards her. Waning. What happened? Celia asked, worried. She was still confused of why she was in the wolfed place. She did not remember why she was there, but she wanted to comfort Twining first. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Sky Waning said, using the mind link. What about Sky? Celia asked, with her eyebrows furrowed. She felt that name familiar. Sky, my mate. He is suffering. Chapter 35. The only mate. Hearing the name Sky and the word mate made Celia snatched out of her haziness. She remembered that just moments earlier she was exchanging blood with His Highness. She must have fainted, and her human consciousness was brought here. But why? Was it Waning, the one who brought her? Sky is the name of His Highness's wolf. Then, he's your half. His Highness is truly our mate. Celia asked Twining with eyes wide open. Yes, he's our rightful mate. And we his rightful Luna. Waning replied telepathically after a moment of silence. She had kept the burden herself all this time, but by doing so she hurt him, even though she did not mean to. Perhaps she should have said it earlier and it could have avoided this situation, but it could have also made it worse. Their mate was strong. That was why she had counted on him doing all right even without her, at least for a little while longer. But, Crescent, what would have happened to her? You told me he is suffering, but we are now helping with His Highness's treatment. Is it not going well? Celia asked, worried. The most important thing was this. Above all else, even if her mind was chaotic and bewildered by Waning's earlier statement, he's at least getting more stable. Before his life was slipping away, I was just overwhelmed by almost losing him and by my inability to do something about it. Waning replied honestly, so the treatment is effective. Asked Celia, getting a bit relieved. If he was stable, then the dangerous period should have passed. Waning nodded, making Celia finally settle down in regard to this issue, and now she could return to the previous topic. She kept silent for some time, trying to understand why her wolf had kept things hidden from her. She sighed and tried to collect her thoughts. No matter what, Waning had always put Crescent and her first. She always thought about them before herself. She was the one who had sacrificed the most. Celia knew Waning kept herself hidden all these years because she was too strong and did not want to disrupt Celia's life. She was even content with only Crescent shifting. Whenever Celia felt lonely, she was always there for her. The only time she ever took control was when her life was in danger. Waning would never intentionally hurt someone, so if her actions did hurt a person, then she must have had a proper reason to do so. But how? Why? But His Highness is my mate. Then why have I not felt it? Why did I not realize it when I first met him? Celia asked, finally deciding on what to ask first. There were too many questions she wanted answers to. I hid myself deep within your mind, so deep no one would have felt me present, Waning replied, bringing her muzzle down on her paws. In remorse, Celia realized Gabriel was right for. His Highness, on some level, had recognized her as his. But she did not. She loved him, but because Waning was mostly hidden, she did not feel like he was her counterpart, her half. Then where did Ray-Ann fit in all this? Then, Ray-Ann, why did I recognize him as my mate? And he also recognized me, Celia asked, confused and bewildered. Ray-Ann is not our mate entirely. You could even say he never was. He is Crescent's mate. And you, having her consciousness, felt like he was indeed yours too. But he's only Crescent's, Waning replied, but seeing that Celia was confused, explained more. There were supposed to be 2 of you at birth. Diane was pregnant with a pair of identical twin girls. But each time a queen of werewolves is born, her existence is strong. More so with us being as strong as our mate. And even if there was another baby with her in the womb, the other baby would vanquish. It would be absorbed by the stronger one, which was our case. We remained the only ones in your mother's womb. I felt sorry for the other girl, but there was nothing that could be done for her to survive. The problem was, just before she was completely absorbed, I felt another consciousness in her. I felt her wolf. In general, a normal wolf gains self-consciousness later than the human side. So the other twin should not have had a wolf yet. But unfortunately, Crescent was already there even though your sister's human side was not. Her thwank and her elements of fire and water had made her much stronger and thus surface earlier, without a body to be born with. Crescent was dying, so I did the one thing I could think of. I stopped us from sinning before even being born. I took her consciousness and placed it alongside mine. Waning tried to explain as best she could. But why did you never tell me this? Celia said, as she was putting the pieces of the puzzle together. How could I tell you? We are supposed to be the queen of all werewolves. I am supposed to safeguard and be a mother to all wolves. But even before being born I was killing another wolf because of my existence. You were a baby at first, then a child. Even if I told you, you would not be able to understand it. And as you got older it was even more difficult to say. The human side is always the more to be burdened by the daily life. You were the one to interact with our family, the pack and other people. Because of their actions, you closed yourself from the world. You chose to hide your feelings, bit by bit every day, until you do not share your emotions at all now. This was the least I could do, so I carried this burden by myself. And Crescent, she knows nothing. She was barely a young pup, frightened and alone. Informing you then, she would know as well. Waning replied, getting even sadder. Small whimpers could be heard from time to time as she was explaining. Then, she knows now because you told me. Worried asked Celia. Enthusiasm, Crescent was the most cheerful of the bunch. She would not take this information with ease. To find out that she was not supposed to exist would break her, to say the least. No, she does not know. She is in a dormant state. To keep her safe, I can only do this for now. Waning replied. Why is she not well? Celia asked, concerned. For now she is safe, but this is only a temporary solution. Waning sadly affirmed. Crescent had been so dear to her, and the pain of losing her was the same as the pain of losing a sister. But she has been with us all of our life. We can still keep her with us in the same body. Why is she getting weaker? When I placed her with my consciousness, I thought it would be enough. I hoped she could live with us. But for both of us to coexist in a place meant for only one wolf, a fine balance was needed. I am stronger than Crescent, but I suppressed myself as much as possible. I tried to avoid even shifting. I tried everything to prevent us gaining more power to maintain that very frail equilibrium. But by rejecting Rayan, Crescent lost more of her strength, making it harder for me, as I had to lower mine also. So I suppressed myself even more. I hid in the deepest corner I could, but as the dominant side, finding our rightful mate, made the tip of the scale become even more unbalanced. Meeting Salas and Sky, recognizing and accepting one another as mate, I knew I would gain more and more power. The more we would be fond of them, the stronger our bond would get, making her consciousness slip away. I would kill her, so I temporarily tried to hide from my mate. I thought he would not love us if he could not sense and complete us. Person and wolf. But he still fell in love, and now he was about to die. It was only supposed to be temporary, just until Crescent was saved. Then I would have told you and him. I never thought that. Waning said, sad, trying to acknowledge all the information she just learned. Celia now understood her reasons. Honestly, if she would have been in her place, she would have done the same. She would also not be able to accomplish her wishes, if it meant hurting someone. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Being selfish and fulfilling her desires and enthusiasm, in the process, kill Crescent or Waning. If she's in a dormant state, then will she die? Celia asked with a heavy heart. Even though Crescent was never her wolfer, the bond they had was stronger than family. It had only been the three of them, one person to wolves. Not to mention that for her, it still felt like Crescent was her wolf no matter what. Clarissa has been trying to find a solution all this time. That was why she is traveling. She is close to finding it, Waning replied. She was getting a bit more relaxed. Having shared everything with Celia. Clarissa knew of this. Celia asked wide-eyed. Yes, she has always known. From the moment she found us in the forest after we killed those rogues. From the moment we first met her. But I asked her to not tell you. Waning said. Will there be enough time for Clarissa to find the solution? Can we also help? We can't just stay and do nothing. Celia said anxious. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She knew Waning was level-headed. If they could have done something with their own hands, Waning would have already told her before, and they would all search for the solution. But it was most likely not something they could do themselves. Clarissa was a witch from the most powerful of covens, and some time ago she even assumed its leadership. A witch was the best problem solver. She had the best connections with every other supernatural creatures. The spells, curses and potions of a witch were sought out by everyone and, generally, the payment for those were a favor the witches would get from said creatures. That was their traditions from long ago. Clarissa had helped a lot of high-ranking creatures in her long life, so she must have gotten information from them. The best suited to help us as a witch. No one else. And as werewolves. Because of the last war 30 years ago, most connections with witches were weakened. They would not help us. They would even try to sabotage us finding the solution. If we would ask ourselves, Clarissa is a fortunate exception. Do not worry. With Crescent in dormant state in the deepest corner where I previously was, she can hold on for longer. Keeping her in one place is easier. Clarissa also informed me that she would be coming any day now. Waning tried to comfort Celia. As Celia thought, she could not have helped. Or else they would already be in the middle of doing something. They could only wait. But even waiting, Waning had been doing it herself. Celia looked at the majestic white wolf, feeling a sense of déjà vu. Waning was already a queen. Her sorrow and loneliness in being the only one aware of everything could be felt and seen all around her. She resembled Solas in this way. Celia did not ask more questions for now. Waning was safe and like Crescent, but she felt the need to keep her close. She approached her wolf that was towering above, burying her body in the white fur, embracing her large neck. Are you all right? Waning, we have been talking about Crescent, but how are you doing? Celia asked gently. The white wolf said nothing more, but small whimpers could be heard as she lowered her head near Celia's, trying to hold her close. Since young they only had each other. The rare light rays of the winter sun that entered the window kept Solas from sleeping longer. He opened his eyes, a bit disturbed by the blinding white light, and tried to accustom his eyes and cure them from their haziness. Hearing the beeping sound that he did not recognize, he looked around him, realizing he was not in his room inside the royal palace, but in the hospital. Only then did he remember the rogue's attack. He thought he had been sleeping, but in fact he was previously unconscious, trying to find someone to get some information on the current state of things. He looked around, stretching his neck. If he could find a nurse or maybe his phone, then he could get Michael or Gabriel to come. But he did not find one or the other. As his head moved, while looking around, his eyes froze, captured by the view on the right side of his bed. Like his own attire and appearance, the love of his life was also laid on an adjacent bed. She was dressed with a pale blue hospital gown and covered with a white-colored blanket. The only parts of her body that were not covered were her small soft hands connected to machines, and an intravenous drip going in her smoost. She was sleeping or perhaps unconscious. It frightened him, seeing the petite woman again in this state. He had sworn before she would never have to suffer like that, and here she was looking how she looked several weeks ago. It scared him, thinking that the rogues had managed to get so deep inside his palace and hurt her. Luckily, his anger and anxiousness, that kept on rising, were easily subdued when the frail woman slowly opened her beautiful eyelashes to reveal her chocolate brown eyes. Locking her sight with his, he was left speechless. He could not utter a single word. As the feeling of completeness overwhelmed him, His heart beat faster and faster, until it felt like it would jump out of his chest. The captivating gaze of her eyes that were revealed from under her long eyelashes managed to fill every corner of his entire being. He had loved her so much from the very first moment he saw her, until he felt like he could no longer love her more than that. He felt it was impossible to feel even more love. But right in this very moment he did the impossible. He could not look away, although he felt he could not even breathe. But strangely, he did not feel any discomfort still, as only one word came into his mind, and without thinking of saying it, slowly opened his mouth and reflexively whispered, "Mate, mate." The small woman mirrored his answer, affirming for him what he had desired with every fiber of his being for the last 100 years. He had finally found her, the half a soul the goddess split from him at the moment of birth. He had found his soulmate, his reason for existing, his everything, feeling shy under his relentless scrutinizing stare. As Solas did not look away even after some moments passed, Celia slowly fell toward. Even her cheeks were getting warmer and redder by the second. Trying to dispel the silence, she fought to say something, but the only meager word that managed to escape her lips was only 2 letters long. As he slowly whispered, "Hello," he whispered back, showing the warmest smile she never thought was possible to be seen on that solemn face. It was not the unapproachable smile that he would show from time to time. It was a blinding smile that warmed up her heart until it felt she would be scorched from within. That was it. She could no longer take being under his constant gaze, so she took the blanket that only covered her abdomen and concealed her body whole. Not even a strand of hair could be seen outside. He opened his blue eyes more, surprised by her cute reaction, before breathing out in a low hoarse laugh, as his lips widened into an even bigger smile. Seeing the cocoon she turned herself into flinch under the covers, he realized that even his laugh affected her emotions, making his heart swell from happiness. "You are so cute," Solas appreciated, voicing out his real inner thoughts. "Don't," she said from under the covers, as she did not dare to look at him. "Don't what?" Teasing her. Although he knew she meant to not speak further, she did not speak again. Aware of his taunting, this man would be the death of her. The room became silent once again, making her wonder what he was doing. Why couldn't the doctor come faster, or someone else? Anyone, it didn't matter who. Just so they wouldn't be alone, Celia thought. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." He voiced takes of pain some moments later, scaring her. She had been so mesmerized by him that she had overlooked his wounds. She realized. She quickly uncovered her face and tried to sit up. What if his life was still in danger? But, as she sat up and took the cover off her face, she remained petrified. The foreign feeling that she thought she would never come to know again, the warmth and touch of his lips covering hers, shocked her, numbing her resistance away. He kissed her softly like one would peck a small baby, barely touching her small lips, afraid she would retract them, but she stayed still, delighting him. Moments later she finally reacted and slowly moved back. She was lost for words. Opening and closing her mouth, she finally said to the lying man who still had not backed away, who was still leaned over her bed. Shameless, he had dared use her concern for his well-being just to make her look at him and take advantage of the situation. Celia thought. Realizing he was still the king, she instantly regretted her words as she gasped and covered her mouth with both her hands. Would he reprimand her? Would he feel she had overstepped? She looked into his eyes trying to find the answers. But he was still smiling unaffected. "You are mine," he chuckling affirmed. Chapter 36. Unconditional Trust. She flinched once again, hearing his declaration. As the king, his confidence was supposed to be high, considering no other werewolf was above him. But his audacity to declare her as his still shook her. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." She would never admit, perhaps even in death, She quite liked this part of his personality, a side of him only known to her. That is, she tried to say, when he was still looking at her cheekily. What? Are you going to deny that you are mine? Solos asked, a bit playful, but a fleeting bit of anxiousness could be sensed in his look. She had tried to reject and keep a distance from him before. She had even ran away from him in the garden previously, so though he knew she was his mate, he still needed confirmation from her. He wanted to hear from her own pretty lips that he had just kissed. Her willing answer, not a conditioned response that was spoken regardless of a person's will, each time one had found their half. Only then could he finally believe it to be true. It seemed he had grown quite greedy, Solos thought. Finding his mate was no longer enough. He wanted her to want him for he was, just as much as he desired her. Without thinking too deeply, Celia wanted to deny. That was her fault. She was not used to having someone she would call her own, so how could she be someone's as well? Not to mention, she knew he wanted to tease her again, as she did not want to be caught up in his trick. But she detected a flash of uneasiness in his eyes. I am not, she slowly said, as her voice gradually got more lower, until it resembled a whisper. It made Solos's heart pang, as he clenched his jaws and fingers because of the nervousness. Did she want to reject him? Did she want to say she was not his? He had been a bit more confident moments earlier, but now it felt like his very life's fate was rested on those rose-colored lips. Going to deny? Celia whispered the last part, but his werewolf fears heard it loud and clear. The answer that came willingly from her was even more precious to his ears than when she said the word mate. It made his heart hurt from joy, even though a second earlier it suffered from pain. She did not even manage to see his reaction, as she was engulfed by his strong arms in a tight embrace. She was so tightly held that even if she wanted to, there was no space for her to separate herself. Not that she had such intention. In all honesty, she had never wanted a mate. She had never felt someone would want to be so close to her. She had never thought of herself like someone worthy to become someone's one and only. But he made the desire she did not even know she had, the deepest secret held unknowingly in the deepest parts of her heart, fulfilled, and he had done so with just his presence. Awkwardly, she put some strength in the hands that were loosely dangling before, and slowly raised them up, feeling his hug returned. Solos hugged her even tighter, without much concern to the wounds he had which had not yet healed completely. He was afraid it was just a dream and he would wake up to find himself alone on the hospital bay and Celia nowhere in sight. But it could not be a dream. Her petite frame with her head resting on his chest, her small hands on his back warming him, the feeling of her lips that still lingered on his, and her strawberry scent ever present all around him. These were too vivid for it to only be a dream. Is it a bad time? Should I come back later? Gabriel asked, scratching with his hand the back of his head. She hurriedly let go of the embrace at the sound of his voice. Embarrassed of her actions, the loss of the warmth of her soft body against his made Solos frown in annoyance as he looked towards the disturbing factor. Was Gabriel really his friend? He knew he had suffered for the last 100 years because he had no mate. If he saw the scene of them in an intimate setting, shouldn't he have quietly left them alone? What Solos was not aware of was the fact that he had also prevented or interrupted Maria's and Gabriel's time together many times in the past, with all kind of different requests that had lessened the time he could spend with her. And Gabriel had held a bitter grudge in this regard. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The official version, if someone were to specifically ask him, would be the fact that he interrupted them because he was worried about their health. Satisfied with his little revenge, he approached them more with a warm, innocent smile. After closing the door behind him, he had maintained his warm expression, even in Solos's obvious anger, and stared seemed to be able to blow a hole through him. Are you all right, Celia? Asked Gabriel, going for the less aggressive one of the two. Yes, I am all right, she replied hurriedly, though truthfully, the wolfsbane in her veins was not completely removed yet, and she was feeling under the weather. It was only because the interaction with Solas had caught her off guard, and so she did not pay any mind to how she was feeling. But Gabriel's question reminded her of the fatigue and pain. "What happened to you?" Solas asked, remembering she was dressed in patient clothing. As the joy of finding his mate overclouded his mind and the fact she did not have obvious injuries on her. He had previously admitted this particular fact. But looking closer at her, she did have a slightly paler face with small dark circles around her eyes. He had not noticed before, as he felt she was beautiful no matter what. It was nothing important, Celia said, dismissing her current state. "It was not nothing. She helped your treatment against the wolfsbane, just like you previously helped her. Really? You and Solas as well? You both have to say these things clearly. You are too innocent. Even though you are the highest-ranking werewolves currently, it seems to me you are also in need of a teacher in shamelessness. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm," Gabriel said with conviction. Really, the best way to have a firm grip of the other's heart was for that person to be aware of all the things you did for him or her. But it seemed to him that both of them did not take advantage of such facts. Solas had also not informed her before what he had done for Celia when she was injured. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Perhaps could have avoided all the drama. A teacher in shamelessness, asked Celia, not understanding one bit of his last phrase. Gabriel coughed, realizing his blunder. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "I misspoke. I only meant it is shameless of us, if we do not inform His Highness of everything that has happened while he was unconscious." Gabriel revised his words to give them a different meaning, trying to cover his mistake. "Wait, does it mean you did the transfusion for me? Why did you? You could have died," Solas said, his anger raising. He remembered just how numbing the pain of the wolfbane was when her blood had entered his veins. Not to mention he had no pre-existing problems at that time. He was completely healthy and he still suffered for days after. But for this delicate woman to also go through such an experience, it was the only solution. She gently answered, refraining herself from also adding that she could not watch him die. "Who said so? I could have regenerated myself. There was no need for you to go through it. Did you tell her about the treatment, Gabriel? Or was it the doctor? Who was the culprit?" Solas asked angrily, looking towards Gabriel the whole time, even though Celia was the one who had answered his question. It was like no matter what she said or did, someone else would be to blame. Gabriel stayed quiet, afraid that anything he would say would incriminate him. Solas looked like he was about to murder the one who had put her in jeopardy. "Your Highness, you are contradicting yourself. First you said that I could have died, and now you say you could have regenerated without help." Celia sighed as she eyed him, changing her gentle tone to a sharp one. Then she continued to admonish him. "It was your fault that you could not keep yourself safe, even though that should have been your first priority. Now you blame the innocent people who helped you. Neither one of them are to blame. Gabriel did not know what the treatment was under your doctor, was under your command, and could not speak of it, even if he wanted to. I was the one who ordered the doctor to tell me what he did for me and made him do the same for you. If you want to punish someone, then punish me," Celia said, raising her voice, while she appeared upset. The sound of her sweet voice, which had never spoken so many words to him at once before by her own choice, and the care he felt from each scolding that came from her sweet mouth, calmed Solas down. "It is not your fault. Of course it is not. It is my mistake. You are absolutely right. Please don't be upset. You will hurt yourself more," Solas said gingerly, trying to pacify the cute woman. Gabriel looked baffled at the obvious display of affection. If he could, he would bow down to Celia. It was a commending feat, having tamed the big bad wolf. Nonetheless, he was also thankful that she had intervened. When the doctor wanted to separate the two and move Celia to a different room, he instinctively stopped him. He told the doctor that, no matter what, They should be kept together. His survival instinct was on point. Perhaps if she was not present in the same room. But Solos felt her weak presence in the hospital. He would wreck the place and people to get to her. Now that you know what happened with the treatment, let's talk about something else. Did I just witness you hugging Celia when I entered? Asked Gabriel, trying to redirect his attention. Who knows if the king would still blame him. To my agent extraordinaire, Madame Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Celia's face flushed. She was so flustered by his question that she did not know what to say. Why would the teacher have to talk so bluntly of what he saw? His Highness and Gabriel, both really were good friends. They resembled each other. Both liked to point these kind of things out in the open without any shame. She thought, "It is not your concern to notice that," Solos said, with a voice full of authority. It made Celia ease up, knowing that she would not have to talk about it. Of course mates would hug each other. It is only natural, Solos affirmed with the same voice, making Celia become uneasy again. Really true friends these men were. Are you mates? Have you talked with Waning yet? Gabriel asked, thrilled. He just knew he was right. Not yet, but Sky has already acknowledged her presence. Solos confirmed. The black wolf was pacing up and down in his mind, itching to shift to also meet his mate Utcher. He had only managed to talk with her using their mind link, but he was already smitten. That's great and all, but can you tell us why she did not reveal herself until now? Asked Gabriel, curious. It was not her intention to hide. She could not come out yet. Celia immediately defended her wolf. She was afraid the latter would be misunderstood. Seeing her worried face, Solos immediately intervened. It is all right. I trust her. Don't worry. You can tell me whatever you can. Don't force yourself. I can say it now. I am not forcing myself. I will tell you, Celia replied. She felt assured by his unconditional trust, but she still wanted to tell him her reasons. At the same time, somewhere else tap. Tap tap. That was the only sound that could be heard in the large dark room. The room itself was already eerie enough, with its blood-colored walls, black drapes on the large mahogany windows and dark candles placed from place to place that barely managed to provide it minimal light. Coupled with the lack of furniture, other than a black iron throne decorated with gargoyles, and the constant tapping sound, this frightening image would make a normal human run for their lives. That was what the people that were kneeled on the floor also felt. Although not humans, it took a lot of effort to abstain themselves from doing just that. Run as fast as their feet could manage, to the farthest place they could, but they knew that they would only be able to reach the door, or perhaps just barely manage to get up on their feet, before their heads would swiftly be separated from their bodies if they tried to run. So they could do nothing at all, just have their head lowered with their neck shown in submission, holding their breath and hope they could survive this night. The tapping sound continued, making them feel like someone was actually tapping on their hearts. They had been waiting, for what it seemed like forever, for that person to open his mouth. The agony of not knowing one's fate, terrifying them to their very core. So then, what you are telling me? The hoarse, deep voice that made their head bow even lower, casually started to say. One who did not know him could say he was having a normal conversation, but the peoples on the floor would beg to differ. Just for the fact that his voice was to calm, they already knew that he was angry as he could be. He is not dead. The person on the throne finished asking. From what we could gather, the person in front stuttering tried to explain. He was already feeling the cold air against his neck, as though it was actually a sharp claw that was about to rip his head off when he started to explain. But by only 5 words later, he was already regretting his choice in how he phrased said words. From what you could gather, repeated the person on the throne, still tapping rhythmically his finger on the throne's armrest, realizing that prolonging the silence was not in his favor, as it only made that person in front of him angrier by the second. The man continued to speak with more concise words. Sodo's Christian wolf is not dead. closing his eyes as he felt small droplets of water covering his face. He was already prepared to be executed for his failure. Hearing this, the man with platinum blonde hair and cold grey eyes finally stopped tapping his fingers. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. How? I was assured that at least 5 bullets passed through his body. Still calm. Yes, 5 bullets indeed hit him. Of this I can personally assure you. The kneeled person quickly confirmed. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The blonde man asked. We do not know for sure. My king, we are still. These were the only words that the kneeled person could utter before he was struck down. Red blood spilled from his lifeless body, scaring the others. But none of them moved from their places, even though the ones near the body could clearly see that his blood was about to reach their feet. They did not dare even flinch, in fright that they would be next. Is there someone else who can tell me with certainty? Or are the rest of you not sure as well? The king asked. He was still calm, like he was not the one who killed his subject. But the red blood on the fingertips, that previously kept on tapping, were proof of his cold act. If not for his red-dyed fingers, you could not actually tell he was the one who killed the kneeled person, as he was still sitting on his throne for the entire time. Or at least that was how it appeared. Moments passed, but no one dared answer his question. The next one to answer would be the next one to die. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. No one wished to do so. The person who had just died was the highest ranked between them. Even if he did not want to, he was the one who was obligated to provide the information for the cold-blooded person on the throne. But the rest were the same rank. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Well, it seems I was just being a bit impatient. I should watch a little bit my temper. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. We are still in the researching phase. Forgive me, I was getting a little ahead. The king sighed, as he returned to tapping his fingers. Only then did the people relax a little, although they still did not dare move from their position. Chapter 37. Unmarked mate. So basically, let me know if I got this right. Crescent was actually your sister's wolf, but because your sister was absorbed in the womb, she was brought by waning in your mind to share the same place, thus preventing her death. But now with you rejecting Crescent's mate and finding a true mate, Waning is no longer able to maintain Crescent alongside her for much longer. So the latter is once again in grave danger of perishing. Gabriel tried to summarize what Celia had just informed them. Frowning, he waited for Celia to affirm if he understood correctly, while also trying to think if there was a precedent for such a thing that could help the future queen. But he did not need to think much. For the previous queens, or at least other high-ranking werewolves, to have 2 wolves in the same body was without a doubt an information one would never forget, especially him who taught history and general knowledge at the academy. Celia listened to his words and, confirming she indeed made herself understood correctly by them, nodded her head. Okay. Understood. About the witch who is currently trying to find a solution. Will she be able to handle it on her own? Or is there something we can do to assist? I could at least analyze a little more Crescent's state with the seer, to see how she is. Gabriel asked. The seer was the tool the Pack Doctor mostly used when healing werewolves, one of its abilities being that it could check the health of a wolf. He used the special seer in his possession to mostly check the student Wenks and Sabranks. He was not a doctor, but he could at least also check the wolf's current condition. No matter what, we will do everything in our power to ensure the wolf's safety. We will also delegate some trackers to investigate alongside the witch and the Watcher teams that are on stand. I will join in on the search for a solution. Do not worry, I am here for you, Solas assured her. Thank you for offering your help, but Clarissa is the only one who can find it. Also, if there are too many people checking, it could have the opposite effect. She now has some leads, but if others intervene, those leads could be lost, Celia earnestly said. She was thankful for his support and trust, but she had talked more with waning, after calming the wolf from her sorrow, and for now they could only wait. Solaz looked into her eyes to seek in a small sign of wavering, but he realized she indeed was not holding back, and there was nothing he could do currently. Well, even if she did not need help right at this very moment, who knows about the future? Just to make sure he would keep track of what was happening anyway, and if she really needed his help later on he would offer it, even without her asking. Clarifying the situation with Celia and waning, they redirected their attention to the attack that happened more than 3 days ago, which was also a major problem. To attack in less than a month, when they previously had decades of peace, was not a minor problem. It was early evening when Gabriel left, after having informed Solaz of all the information they had collected about the rogues, which unfortunately were not detailed. All the werewolves that were caught had killed themselves before even a piece of information was extracted from them, and no other evidence of their identity or other clues could be found in their possession. Their information network contained data on every werewolf in the kingdom. Each member of every pack had their data stored by the officials. But rogues were lawless. They mated and had pups in the wild without a proper doctor, who could tell how many there were even where they came from. Lastly, Gabriel had also asked Solaz's approval on other urgent matters that needed Solaz's express permission. It was already 2 a.m. in the morning. By now Solaz should have been for quite some time already, considering the extent of his injuries and the wolfsbane, which had kept him unconscious for the last 3 days, following the rogue attack. But strangely, he could not close his eyes even for a moment. He barely even blinked as he stared at the bed next to his. The beautiful girl was breathing slowly and at an even pace. It was a clear sign she was sleeping, but he could not do the same. He could only stare at her face, which fortunately was inclined towards him, studying her every lovely feature. Fatigued by the regeneration that was still taking place in her body and by the constant pains caused by the wolfsbane, which drained even more of her energy, Celia had fallen asleep as soon as her head touched the pillow, shortly after Gabriel left. In a way, it was perfect for Solaz. If she had not fallen asleep, perhaps she would have asked to be moved to another room, depriving him of openly admiring her loveliness, even though she was not in the best conditions. Even though no makeup adorned her face, he could not help but trace his eyes slowly from the lovely forehead, to her defined neither thick neither thin eyebrows, to her lovely closed big eyes that could barely be seen hidden by curly eyelashes, to the tall nose that seemed small between the plump cheeks, to her pink moist lips until the sharp small chin. One would think that he would have seen and known her features by now by heart, as he had kept repeating these same steps for hours. He should have been bored of looking already, but even though he could draw her face from memory, he still kept on gazing, as he could not get enough. Each time his eyes reached her chin, he traced them up again, towards her lips, nose until he would reach her forehead, but this time his eyes stopped when they reached hers, not going up again. Her eyes were already open now, making him unable to look anywhere else, but straight into them. He could get lost in those chocolate brown eyes. "I am sorry, Your Highness. I must have fallen asleep." She immediately apologized. After a second of confusion, "It's all right. You must recuperate. Keep on sleeping," Solaz gently said. She shook her head. She had already slept long enough. And now, knowing he had been watching her sleep, she was even less likely to manage to close her eyes and fall asleep. Solaz no longer insisted. She was already laid on the bed. Even if they talked a bit, if she felt sleepy she could immediately do so. Not to mention, when she was sleeping she was beautiful, but awake he could also talk to her and hear her voice, so it was even better. "Your Highness, actually I wanted to tell you something," Celia said slowly, a bit uneasy. He did not say anything, waiting for her to put her thoughts into words. "I know that I said, when Gabriel was here, that what I informed you both was the whole situation, But, in fact it is not, Celia said with the same tone. Looking at him, she felt a bit relieved that his face did not change, even though she had just said she withheld some information. But she still felt awkward at the same time about talking of his problem with Solas. Tell me, whatever you have to say will not anger me, Solas replied with a small smile, which he showed to make her comfortable and talk without anxiousness. He could see she was troubled about the issue. No matter what she had to say, he would not blame her. She had justified Waining's actions when they talked, and he understood that they had never meant to hide indefinitely from him. Sky had also talked with his mate, and he felt the same as him. Even though the king of the werewolves was always more ruthless and prone to violence, the queen was actually his exact opposite. Perhaps the goddess made it so to maintain a balance and to keep the king's rage in check. That was also the case for his mother, who was a gentle and caring person, so he knew that it was in Waining's and Celia's interest as the queen to act and help others, even if it could harm them by doing so. I know from the history class from school that, whenever the king met his mate in the past, the mate would be marked almost immediately, Celia said, even slower and a little stuttering, with her cheeks burning red. It was a very embarrassing thing to say herself, to discuss about the marking, but what if Solas would want to do the same? If he wanted, then it would be a problem, so she wanted to be fair and explain herself first. She had already said everything else. Might as well get everything out in the open. Yes, that is correct. More so than the average werewolf. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Following the will of the goddess, marks his mate immediately after finding her. This is a tradition from a long time ago. It is to prevent or at least diminish the number of rejections in the werewolf kingdom, as the king sets the example for his subjects. The will of the goddess implies free will, so there is no law in regards to forcing the mates together. But if the king marks and immediately recognizes the legitimacy of his queen, then the subjects will have no choice but to do so with their respective mates. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. There are still idiots, every now and then, who deny their mate. Fortunately for me, Solos added mentally, if Rain had recognized and marked Celia before he found her, then it was possible that there was nothing he could have done to take her away. In this regard, he was very lucky that Rayan was an idiot. He dreaded of what could have happened. What if Rayan had been someone who waited for his maiden? At the winter ball, he had come with Celia holding his arm, while she was pregnant with his pup. He might have lost all his sanity and gave in to his ruthlessness. Perhaps all the guests at the ball would no longer be alive. Realizing his thoughts had trailed off, he immediately tried to recollect himself. Anyway, Waning would not have let that happen. He hoped, but still to protect Crescent, he could not know to what extent she was willing to sacrifice herself and Celia. But why are you asking me? Do you not want to be marked? He continued, showing a hurt expression on his face, an expression he could not hide, even if he wanted to. An unmarked mate. Was she still not certain of creating a proper bond with him? It is not a problem if whether I want to or not. You see, when I discussed with Waning, she said that even if Crescent is dormant for now, a major increase in power could still damage her. The marking would certainly make her stronger. In Crescent, Celia tried to explain, do not worry, I can wait until her problem is solved. Then I will mark you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Solas interrupted her and immediately assured her, if it was not because she did not want to be marked, then he could wait a little longer. He had waited for decades. What difference would a little more time do? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Since she was now with him, it only meant that he would just have to do something else to keep the flies away. Is it really all right? Won't the council have a problem with it? I could see that at the ball. The head councilman was trying to introduce Lady Yvonne to you. Celia asked, worried. The council has hoped for the longest time that I would find my mate. It was just that after 80 years of searching, they gave up on finding the real one, settling for the next best thing, a strong werewolf to bear an heir, to have the real mate by my side and give birth to my heir, or another one less strong werewolf female who would give birth to a weaker heir. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. They would choose the former, even if they have to wait a little longer for you to give birth. Oh, she replied. It was already awkward enough, bringing up the marking first. Now that babies were mentioned, her face turned betrayed. Your Highness, can I ask you another thing? Celia said quickly, her last problem. It was also a mean to dispel the awkwardness. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. This problem was also not something he would easily agree to. She knew that he had already been lenient towards her. He had listened to her reasons without doubting even one of her words. Just now he had also agreed to not mark her, even though there could still be repercussions from the council. He had made it seem easy, but she knew that it could also be just to protect her. Perhaps it would put him in a difficult spot. And now, she wanted to ask something else of him. She was already overstepping herself, but it had been her dream since young. It was the wish she had put her heart and soul in achieving. She had only recently started working for it. She had barely begun studying to be a watcher, so she did not want to stop. A queen had so many responsibilities to fulfill, so never in history had the queen held other responsibilities other than those she held in that particular position. Sure, whatever doubts you have in your heart you may say them. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You must understand a queen is her king's equal. I wish for you to tell me and discuss with me everything. I do not want secrets between us. I will also discuss with you my problems. Never be afraid to tell me something. As long as it does not involve your safety, I am willing to compromise. Solar said lightly, but his tone showed sincerity. He wanted her to be able to tell him anything, without being afraid of the consequences. Their relationship was just at the beginning of the road. If they started on a wrong step, he feared it would lead to a crossroad, and perhaps she would choose to leave him. He wanted to build a relationship built on trust. He cherished her too much to do otherwise. Can I still live in the dormitory and study being a watcher? I know that I am, perhaps asking a difficult thing, but I cannot give up my dreams, Celia said, even though she usually shed her solemn and stern face in his presence. At this moment her determined face could clearly be seen. His silence made her think that it would truly be a difficult wish to be granted. Was it really unachievable? Well, it is not something that a queen in the past ever did, but it would not be an impossible task. If you would agree to 3 conditions of mine, I will fight for your cause in front of the council. Solor said also with a solemn expression in his face, as though he would really have a hard time convincing those old men. Yes, I agree. She suspected a bit when he said she would have to agree to his conditions, but he had granted 2 of her wishes. It was only fair she would also compromise, so she immediately agreed without even asking what those conditions were. The corner of his lips rose up in a smirk, satisfied she had agreed so quickly, and without waiting a second longer for her to change her mind. He quickly enumerated them. The first condition is for you to call me Solas. You are to be my queen. It is not right for you to keep on using formal speech. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. If you chose to use a pet name, like Darling or My Love, I would not mind, Solo said, checking her face. He had started with the easiest condition, for her to let her guard down. Pet names. I could not call you. Your name is fine. Solos is fine, she quickly stated. And like he expected, she quickly responded. A bit of a pity that she would not use pet names, but he would work towards that in the future. The second condition is for you to live at the palace on the weekends. I know students have to stay during the week, but please grant me the weekends at least." With a sad smile on his face. "All right. If the academy permits it, then I will come to the palace on weekends," Celia replied happily. She had thought that his conditions would be difficult, but fortunately they were not. She quite liked them as well. Spending time with her mate would be wonderful. Once mates found each other, it would be difficult for them to be apart for a longer period of time, so she could understand his reasons. "The third condition is I would like us to be engaged. I can understand the reasons behind not being able to have the mark on your neck, but I would still like for you to have a mark. A promise of our future together," Solar said gingerly. "Oh, okay," replied Celia. An engagement was something that was common between the humans. Werewolves did not necessarily need or wish to get married. What valued most was the mark on their necks. Most of the werewolves abided by this human tradition, only if they chose to live in the human towns and cities. But considering she could not be marked, it was understandable, as the regeneration had started to heal Salas's wounds and they both were no longer unconscious. They got the okay from the doctor to be moved to the royal palace. The personal quarters of the king were in close proximity, so the ride was short and it would not make them too fatigued and uncomfortable. Walking down the hallways of the palace, with Solas holding her hand, as he had become a bit dizzy on the way, her brows furrowed, not recognizing the direction they took. But she quickly realized that with him being dizzy, it was only natural for her to accompany him to his room, before returning to her own room. The simple but elegant room fitted Salas's personality like a glove. The king-sized bed, 2 nightstands, a small couch and a coffee table were all the furniture that she could see at first glance. The lack of furniture, and personal items such as photos or other decorations, coupled with a generous amount of light that entered through the large windows, made the large room seem like it was a guest room, more than his personal bedroom. She averted her eyes from looking around too much, guiding him to the bed. He had already dismissed the maids before they entered the room, so even though she felt a bit awkward, she was the only one to help him lay comfortable on the bed. She turned around, after she made sure there was nothing else she could help him with. But instead of walking towards the door, she found herself in his large arms, made on his embrace, with no room to escape. "Why, Your Highness, I must leave." She tried to resist, prying the arms that kept tucking the blanket on her. "Why? This is your room. Where would you go?" Solas asked, seemingly confused. "To the guest room you assigned for me. This is Your Highness's room," she tried to explain, giving up trying to move his hands that would not budge under her strength. She could only convince him with words. Perhaps he was still a bit dizzy and thus did not recognize the room. "But this is your room and mine. Why would you go to the guest room?" Solas asked, still confused. "Why, Your Highness, what do you mean?" Her face was already red from the close proximity, but his words made her blush even more. "You agreed to my condition, so logically from now on we will live together," Solas said, with a bright smile on his face. "I agreed to live in the palace," Celia said, realizing bit by bit that she could have been tricked by his words. "I never said which room and you never asked also," Solar said confidently, removing a small strand of hair from her face, to better see her redness. "But that applies to you also. You never told me I would live in your personal room," she said, a bit upset. She felt like he was ready to take a mile, if she agreed to give him an inch. "The contract is already signed and sealed. I am sorry, but there is nothing I can do. In the future be careful on signing contract. Someone could trick you, if you were to trust in," Solas said quickly. Celia was left speechless. She even regretted thinking she liked this part of his personality. A bit angered, she opened her mouth to contradict him still, but he quickly smothered her words away, covering her small pink lips with his, not letting her utter a word more to reject him.